Actually, what I'm doing today is inspired by an email that I got from a lady in Florida who has been somewhat a part of this ministry since probably 85 or so, for many, many years, who's listening to us. She's probably on there now. Hi, Sue. And she asked me about the fifth dimension. What did it mean, and how do we know we're there, and a bunch of questions. And I thought, rather than just answer her, I'd answer her here with you, and we can go through this a little bit better. I know I mention it a lot, and I have dealt with it in the past, but since Monday night and understanding this conjunction of these planets coming together and the rarity of this cycle, and cycles actually that we're experiencing together at this time, has officially opened the portal. We've lived, as I've told you before, in the overlap of Pisces and Aquarius, and that's the way everything works. Things just don't end and something begins, but as something ends, something is beginning, and they overlap with each other. But according to the research and what we're hearing with what happened on December 21st, 2020, this is the coming together of polarities that have been made separate. There's a difference in what has been made separate and what works together as a polarity. For instance, the electricity that runs in this room, if we chose to make the male and the female, that you need to get this electricity and these wires against each other, we would not have the product. It's them working together as polarities that makes electricity flow consistently to where it can manifest itself as a useful part of our lives. So unfortunately, in the ego's world, the ego takes polarities and perceives them as two opposite things against each other. And you see that today in the world. This is what we see that's going on today, is this pathology of the body politic as it's emerging for us to unite what has been separated by ego. And that means things on a religious level, science level, education level, race level, gender level, all the things that you see clashing against each other must now work together. And we must wake up to a point that we realize that the diversity of the world is needed. Those who have thought, you know, that there's only one thing, one people, one religion, one thing that's right, are totally missing the richness of what it means to embrace the diversity of life. And how can we not see that if we look at nature? Nature itself produces its own diversity. All the different species, all the different colors, all the different many manifestations of nature that we get to enjoy is because of the diversity, and how that they don't work against each other, but they work with each other. One thing I didn't mention the other night is I found it interesting that we were talking about December 21st. December is a 12-month, right? And 21st is an anagram. Everybody understand? Anagrams are when you take letters or numbers that are the same but in a different sequence. So you have 12 and 21, which are polarities that came together, that had been pretty much very different. Saturn has a whole different rotation, has a whole different personality to it in the sense of astrology, but they finally kept moving and moving down through the ages and through the years and through the time until they came together. So this is a sign in the heavens that it is the time for us to come together and realize that the thing that is so missing today is communication. I hope this is what 21 will bring, a time that we can take a deep breath and sit down and start communicating and listening to each other and seeing each other. Because I know that a lot of us who disagree with each other see that as an enemy to what we believe. But I think there's a richness in the diversity of all these beliefs and perceptions that are out there. So I hope that we all come together and reason together. So let's begin here today on Fifth Dimension. I've been talking about this for a long time. Most of what is kind of coming to the forefront are things I've been talking about for 30 years. I started about DNA. I started talking about telomeres. I started talking about so many things that has come to the front. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying that I have been a visionary toward this time that a new norm was coming in. And it's a blessing actually to see this popping up everywhere now, that people are talking about some of these things that have been seen as way out there. You'll not believe how many times I've been told, you're way out there. You're beyond everybody. No. It's just that people and consciousness itself has had to grow, mature, and catch up. And we should always be thankful for all those visionaries that has shown up on the planet throughout the ages to give us consciousness a direction of where it needed to go as it evolved and moved upon itself. But actually this began with me many years ago, and as you know, most everything that inspires me is what I've learned in Scripture. But I was very interested in this statement that it is recorded in the Bible that Yeshua Jesus made, and that before he ascended and went out of the visible into the invisible, he said, I go and do this for a reason. I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, ye may be also. And that's always fascinated me. I don't know where he went and what kind of a place did he prepare that was available to me. Now, we all know from the old Christian teachings that we're thinking about a place called heaven, some glorified Disneyland up in the sky somewhere with paved streets of gold and mansions and all that kind of thing. Well, I haven't believed in that in a long, long time, but I thought, well, then where did you go? What does that mean, where did you go? And you have prepared a place for us that we can join you. And all of this has made sense more and more as we begin to understand energy, begin to understand dimensions, we begin to understand frequencies and vibrations, because this is where the answers lie to the questions that religion has. And religion has a lot of questions. Trust me on that. A lot of things they cannot explain, and what they've done, they've pushed it over to the afterlife. And they'll say, we're not to understand it now until we go be with the Lord. See, and they don't realize they're glorifying death. They say the way to heaven is Jesus. No, to them, the way to heaven is to die. Then you go to heaven. If they really believed that Jesus was their way, maybe they wouldn't have to even go through death to get to heaven. Because through the Christ, heaven is available to us here and now at this particular time. So I didn't understand that, but I believe with all my heart what he was saying, that I've changed my vibration, I've changed my frequency, and tuned myself outside of the frequencies that are involved in a world that we live in today, known as a three-dimensional world. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it's very simple to understand three-dimension, and that is that everything you're seeing with your brain and with your physical eyes has a height, width, and a breadth to it. Everything. Everything that you see. It has three dimensions to it. So anything beyond that would be of higher dimensions. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment here as we look into all of this wonderful information that I think is our true hope for things. What is the fifth dimension? As I said, much has been written and spoken and channeled about the fifth dimension and humanity's ascension into this new realm of existence. In addition, many ordinary people are now having their own experience, visions, and inner downloads about the fifth dimension. And as I have told you, that even though a dimension has not been stabilized as a new norm, there are those in the old norm that can raise their vibration and experience the new norm that's coming in. Who are those people? They're just ordinary people in third dimension who have a vision, who have an epiphany, who have a They hear something from the higher self, from their angels, from their guides, whatever you want to call it, but they have that which is above the norm of third dimension. And I don't believe any of you would be here or listening to me today or watching me today that has not had enough experiences out of third dimension that it has raised you into this community that we call New Thought. People in New Thought are there mostly because of some kind of an experience, not because of a change of dogma or doctrine. Most people have sat in maybe their old churches, their old religions, and realized that they had come to a limit in what could be given to them. And in doing that, maybe they started praying or meditating or reading things outside of the Bible and Christian literature, and they started getting a glimpse of something that was beyond the norm of third dimensional religion. I call those the first fruits of the harvest. They are the first ones, and we are those. And we say that with all humility, not with ego, that we have chosen differently, and that is to see beyond the norm of a dimension in which the masses of people mostly live in from day to day. I know as I talk to people individually and learn what they know, it's astounding. I mean, people know some things. People has had some experiences with things that they don't always share in a group, but you get them alone and they open up to you and they feel safe. They start telling you things like, wow, that's amazing. So people are the product of reaching into this dimension that we want to talk about today. According to Ascension teachings, the earth and all beings living on the earth are in the process of shifting into a whole new level of reality, which is a consciousness of love, compassion, peace, spiritual wisdom, and has been called the fifth dimension. Some say this shift can probably be completed within the next couple of decades. Others give no date, but all seem to agree that it will be complete sometime in the near future. Well, that future is now. The future is now. When I read these things and even listen to me talking about, it's coming, we're close, I don't feel that anymore. I feel that we are coming into an alignment with that has been in the future for us. The future is now. And I want us to all be ready for what that means when this fully comes in and the new norm is established into the earth. Let us all pray that it be in earth just as it is in heaven. When the principles of heaven are established in the ordinances of the earth, you will then live in the new earth that is so talked about. Most teachings say that the shift the earth and humanity are taking into the fifth dimension has been planned. Also, it has already been happening in the last few decades. Most likely, December 21st, 2012 was a date that was given to be the midpoint of the shift taking place. So there was a lot of significance around 2012. I think it got off the tracks a little bit as a more fear-based thing about computers shutting down and all that, and people went out and bought groceries, and some people bought cabins and generators and crazy things like that, thinking that's what was going to happen. But I think what really happened was that we entered the midpoint of this process, and now we are at the point itself. Many people think this idea of fifth dimension is a fairy tale. Much about what has been described about fifth dimension can sound like a fairy tale. Woo-woo, way out there. Most likely you don't even want to talk to your family about fifth dimension kind of principles because it is something they cannot wrap their minds around. All people living in peace and harmony, existing oneness with all life, fully representing all people. and the earth itself. Love and compassion flowing through all communications. This is fifth dimension. Equality, justice, respect for all human beings reigning on earth. No more hunger, poverty, or crime. Abundance available to all. Living without fear, with complete trust in the divine. Everyone awakened to the majestic, divine interdimensional beings that they truly are. So think about, we're not really going anywhere per se. You don't have to go anywhere on a physical realm necessarily to get to a different dimension. It is said of the teacher, Jesus, that he told them, as the Christ he was, the Son of God is in heaven. He said that on the earth. Even though he was on the earth, he dwelled in the dimension of heaven or beyond the norms of the other people. And this is why people tend to want to worship these kind of people, whether it's Buddha or Jesus or any of the great enlightened teachers that has shown up on the earth, and try to build religions around them, is because that they see them as beyond, rather than those who are pointing the way to them, that they can move beyond into the dimension. In other words, we stay in the dimension and then we worship those that are emerging up out of that dimension, and we start a religion on them. Probably the worst thing that ever happened is the putting together of what's called Buddhism today, or Christianity, or Judaism, or anything that came from an experience of someone. And people saw that as an experience that was beyond themselves. So they built a belief in that person's experience without the experience for themselves. How many Christians have had the same experience that Jesus would have had 2,000 years ago? No, they just believe in Jesus' experience because Jesus is so far beyond them. They don't understand. He was the way shower. He was the door. He was the portal showing us where we can go. So we stayed and put him up there and worshiped him. And this is what has happened to every major religion in the world that was inspired by someone's experience with a higher fifth dimension and beyond experience, is we just set them on a pedestal, worship them, and built religions around them. And that even goes for things like New Thought and whatever, whether it's Fillmore's or Holmes or any of those that we could name, is we have to be careful that they did not really have the experiences they have and shared their teachings to have religions built around them. They're pointing us to our own inner experiences. So this can all happen very quickly. What are dimensions? Let's talk about that. What are dimensions? First of all, dimensions are not places or locations. They're levels of consciousness that vibrate at a certain rate. They exist as numerous dimensions. The fourth and fifth are simply higher than the one we've been living in. Ascension into even higher dimensions will continue even after we've reached the fifth. So dimensions are vibrations or states of consciousness that vibrate at different frequencies. So let's define first of all the third dimension, the one that we know the most on a daily basis. It's important to understand first of all that the third dimension is not the things that you see, the table, the tree, or the earth itself. These are form. All things in form are still present in the fourth dimension and to some degree in the fifth. They simply are more light-filled and not as dense. So there are things on the third dimension that are lighter than those that are the most dense. And this is the dichotomy of the third dimension, is that there's such a mixture of different vibrations within the dimension of third dimension. And that gives the diversity. But how we perceive the diversity is the issue. It's not the diversity, it's the perception of the diversity of the old thing, I'm not you and you're not me. And if you're not me, then you can't be right. I'm the one that is right. So all of that dichotomy that has gone on in the third dimension is important for us to understand. The third dimension is a state of consciousness, is very limited and restricted. Because we've been living in the third dimension reality for so many lifetimes, we tend to assume that this is the only reality possible to live in. We think this is simply how reality is, not realizing it's a very limited experience of reality. The third dimensional operating system runs on a rigid beliefs and fairly inflexible set of rules and limitations. For example, in the third dimension, we learn to believe that bodies are solid. They can't merge with other or walk through walls. Everything is subject to gravity, physical objects that cannot disappear, and we cannot read another person's mind. There's a solid belief in duality, separation, and judgment, and the fear are pervasive. Now, we already know that isn't true in third dimension. It took a long time for this whole quantum thing to show up in third dimension, but it opened up a complete reality about the physical world of matter, that our bodies are not one, just made of atoms, or made up of organs, but we learned that it was made up of trillions of cells. Then we thought that the atoms made up the cells, and that was the smallest thing. Then we found out even smaller things made the atoms up. We found out that atoms were nothing but spinning electrons, protons, and neutrons, spinning in this field, this energy of the cell that they called empty space. And all of a sudden, the world was getting less dense and less solid all the time, as we begin to invent such things as the electron microscope. And we begin to see things differently that we thought was solid, was not solid at all, but it was in constant movement, constantly fluctuating between destruction and rebirth and recreation at all times. This really changed everything in third dimension as many begin to embrace this new reality of life, that it is energy and vibration. Now, the fourth dimension, many people have different ideas of it. I believe the fourth dimension is the bridge. It is the bridge that prepares you for fifth dimension. When I moved into Soma Energetics and working with solfeggio and frequency vibrations through tuning forks, I felt like it was a different modality from what I had learned. I had learned Reiki. I had become a Reiki master and worked with Reiki energy. And I'd learned Psyche. I'd learned different modalities that was available at that time. And all of them were absolutely wonderful. But they were beyond the modalities of regular third dimension. People who get into Reiki are somewhat becoming above just third dimension. They're working with energy of a different dimension. So I say that those who work with Reiki and work with healing touch and with tapping and all these things, these are fourth dimensional practitioners that have learned these fourth dimensional. And that is the first raising out of third dimension. What is the difference? Third dimension healing is basically fix what's broken. If something is broken, we want to fix it, because that's wonderful, but it doesn't change your vibration. It doesn't change your frequency. It doesn't give you a different location inwardly in consciousness. That makes sense to you? In other words, we go to a doctor with a broken arm. We want the arm fixed. Of course we do. That's very third dimensional. But we don't think about what caused me to have the accident? What caused me to break my arm? Why is it the right arm, not the left arm? Those things are never discussed in Western medicine. It's always about the effect. Fix the effect, stop the pain. And we've spent so long in third dimension ignoring the language and the message of our physical, of our biological self, that is always trying to tell us what we need to take care of in some way. So what I'm saying to you, when I moved into this, I realized that this whole thing of the solfeggio frequencies was out of the ordinary. It was out of the ordinary. It wasn't built on the music. Let's take music. Music therapy has been around for a long time. People use music therapy. People do a lot of music based on a third dimensional style of tuning. And I don't want to get into this a lot, but most of you are very much tuned in third dimension to the diatonic scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's the music we learned. That's the scale we learned. Our instruments are based upon that. But the solfeggio was different. It was not based upon that same 440, a 12-tone temperament scale. It was something else that was going on. And I kept seeking what that was, and it took a long time for me to really understand that it was a scale that brought the curve to the linear. See, we live very linear. We live B's always after A, C's after B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the way we think. We think in linear way. The teachings of Einstein tells us that actually at some point in the linear direction that mass takes, that at some density point, it begins to curve. It curves. That's why everything you see out there is round. Planets, everything that you're going to see out there is round, and it's based upon the density of a planet that determines how that it circles back on itself and catches that spiral. It catches a spiral. Now that's a whole other thing that we could get into, and I'm trying to do, but I'm trying to get you to see this energetically and spiritually, that the question that I have for you, have we entered such a density of third dimensional linear living that now we come to what's called the end of the world? The end of the world. What does that mean, the end of the world? Well, nothing really ends. And nothing really begins in the realm of spirit and of energy. There is no end. So when people are talking about the end of the world and talking about things ending, what they're talking about is the linear has ended, and now it's beginning to find the curve. It's finding the spiral. This is the geometry of the universe, called sacred geometry. It is the geometry that follows this path of scales that I won't get into today, but maybe we will later. I'd like to get with you. They understand the Fibonacci and understand the true math of the world today is totally different than the math that we learned in school at all, which is very linear type math. But that's not the math that's out in the universe that is found. It's called sacred geometry. So if we understand these things, then we can understand how things move through time and space. So we're actually moving out of, there it is, the third, fourth, and fifth. As we move into the fifth, we are moving into a curve that takes us into 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and on. So you got 1, 2, 3. Fourth dimension, 5 dimension, opens up to multi-dimensional space. In other words, there's no more 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which is called in some places string theory. It is string theory. which I know sounds heavy duty and whatever, and it is. It's still in process. But when you get these things on a energetic spiritual level, you understand why that we are in such a tremendous repatterning of the world that we live in and the world that we see. So the fourth dimension has been those who have dared to rise up out of the third dimension into modalities and different things that can be done that can prepare us for the fifth dimensional curve. The fifth dimensional curve. All right, let's talk about fifth dimension. The fifth dimension has been described as a dimension of love, of living totally from the heart. In order to enter to the fifth dimension and stay there, all mental and emotional baggage must be left at the door. No fear, no anger, hostility, guilt exists there. No suffering, no sense of separation. Mastery over thought is a prerequisite. So, to help you imagine with your imagination that we have today, imagine the world just like it is, and then subtract and take away anything to do with the lower nature attributes of humanity. We still mostly live in the lower aspects of humanity. Most people today still live in the three lower chakras below the waist. Most of your energy and time is dealt with survival, family, money, sex, and liking yourself. I just went through the root, the sacral, and the solar plex. Food's another one. Think of how much of your time and energy go toward those attributes. I will say 90% of your life is dealing with one of those issues at all times. Once in a while, you lift yourself up. Maybe you get in a good service, or you get into a good meditation group, or you do some yoga, or you do something like that, and you escape for a little while beyond being drawn back to these lower human attributes. In the Bible, they're called many things. It's called the carnal part of man. The carnal part of man. Ego, we call it sometimes. But it is our more animalistic, and I don't mean animals are bad. I'm just saying that human beings have evolved and developed a front cortex that animals really don't have. We love our animals because we've been there. In the sense of our evolution, we have been there. We've been there with everything that is. We have that story in us. We are animals, but we're animals that have evolved into being Homo sapien human beings. Does that make sense to you? But you have to train your animal. You've got to take care of your animal. There's many things you have to do with animals because of who you are and where you are in the chain of evolution itself. You've been given a position over these things. Everybody I know tends to be very much drawn to their tribal issues, their family issues. Now, I won't touch that because that's a touchy point. I don't touch pets and I don't touch family. But I think people are waking up to some point to realize that their sole purpose is more than the parts we play in the family. You know, one thing that really upsets me, if I see a movie or I see a show where the father's died or divorced or ran, and the mother wants to have a life and date somebody and the kids are having a fit because you're my mother. I don't want to think of my mother having sex with anybody. I want my mother dating anybody. I want you to be my mother. And that goes on to some degree in the collective consciousness, that we don't realize that part of ourselves that is beyond the label we've been given because of our physical identity. Does that make sense to you? I hope it does. It doesn't mean run away from your family and don't be with your family. It just means go ahead and be true to that part of you that's more than that. Follow your passions. Do the things that you dreamed of doing, of being, of having. It's okay. It's okay to say no once in a while to a family member when it's appropriately to do so, and to be true to that higher part of yourself. I don't know why I want to say that, but I just do sometimes, because it just concerns me how much power we give away to try to keep that validation of being a good this and a good that based upon how society sees us and culture sees us. A truly good mother or a good father is good because it is the goodness in them. It is not because they have to be or they should be. It is because of that they are. And I think that makes a huge difference. So just imagine, if you take away the anger, the fear, the hostility, the guilt, suffering, separation, racism, prejudice, just take that out. If you could just take it over here and put it in this bowl and just burn it, then you would know what it's like to be living in the fifth dimension. It's not adding anything, it's subtracting. Scripture comes to me right now. It says that cast away the weights that have you so easily beset, so that you can run the race and receive the prize. And that's what we're going to do in just a moment. Some of the things of not only this year, but things that have come up this year that you are ready to let go of, so that you can feel less dense, more space in your life, space to make decisions, to be who you know that you want to be, but haven't, because you're playing out a third dimensional role that has been given to you. Be true to thyself. It's one of the greatest things that's ever been said. And I need to close here in a minute. I'm not getting very far. Here's what I'm offering you. I have so much on this subject, I thought by a couple of months after we get into the year, I'd like to do another 6-week class on all this third dimension stuff, sacred geometry, and all these things I'd like to get into that I can't with you. But if you're attracted to this information, to understanding this, then I want you to think on, we can do that. We can do it online, or we can do it however you want to do it. But I'd like to take all this information that I've gathered about fifth dimension and all these things that I'm touching today and go into them in depth. Here's what I want to close with you. Third dimensional norms, fifth dimensional norms. Third dimension, it's about me and my stuff. In fifth dimension, it's going to be always about the collective. No more just me and my stuff. My group will become the fifth dimension. We are more citizens of the planetary group of human beings. Third dimension is ego and separation. Fifth dimension will be truly the stabilizing of what we call Christ consciousness. In third dimension, the system is going to be about breakdown. Fifth dimension, the new system is breakthrough. Third is going to be crises. And the fifth is going to be transformation. Third dimension, worry and anxiety. In fifth dimension, there'll be no buffer, and we will live mindfully present. Third dimension is judgment. In the fifth dimension, there'll be total acceptance, living in harmony. Third dimension is more of a linear thinking. Fifth dimension is more access to the vertical, that everything that ever could be is now. Third dimension is brain-driven. Fifth dimension will be heart-driven. Third dimension is caught in third dimension limitations. Fifth dimension is access to parallel universes 6 through 11, sorry. Third dimension is pain body, shadow work to free up energy. Fifth dimension is work with light and photon energy. Third dimension is the continuation of using the body, mind, spirit. Fifth dimension is everything is energy. Third dimension is Christ in me. Fifth dimension is Christ as me. Third dimension is familiar. Fifth dimension is new uncharted territory to experience. Symptoms of this happening to you can be interrupted sleep patterns, headaches, visions and or sight issues, involuntary cries, emotional mood swings, anxious free-flowing energy, brief suicidal thoughts, sudden urge for space, revisiting the past, glimpses into oneness, unable to focus as usual, losing track in time, heightened sensitivity, hearing high-pitched tones, heartburn or chest pressure for no reason, not because of what you ate or didn't eat, heightened sensitivity, dropping things or bumping into things, oh my God, intense desire for change, heightened sense or not being of not being on the planet. Wow. New sense of what time is to you. These are some of the symptoms of that. So much I'd like to say, but we can't do it right now. So I hope that gives you some little glimpse of what fifth dimension is. It's not about us getting in a spaceship and going somewhere. It's not about leaving the planet in a rapture somewhere and going to some place in the sky, but it's about changing our frequency, our vibration, and retuning our consciousness to a more vertical consciousness of all things that were, are now, and all things that can be are now. Living in the point of total mindfulness.
It's time to let your heart light shine.